I was woken by my alarm at 7 o'clock in the morning. I groaned loudly as I fumbled to turn the annoying sound off. Since I was not quite familiarized with the furniture set up in this room just yet, at last, I had to give up and get out of bed. The alarm was balanced on an unpacked box near the outlet, not within reach of my searching hand. I groaned again. First day of school, first day in the new house. How could I forget? Although my very pleasant dreams about sunny white beaches and the small house my mom and I had lived in might have had something to do with that. It had been 3 years now since I had had to move in with my father, the man I'd never seen before until then. My mind shied away from the reason I had to live with my father. Getting out of bed, I hurriedly dressed in jeans and a black top, adding my mom's silver hanger on top. It was an angel's wing, designed so beautifully that you could see every feather to the very smallest detail. It was one of the few things of her I had left. Almost everything else she'd owned had been sold. My father hadn't cared one bit about any of it. At 15, at the time I had been too unsure of myself and mostly to overcome with grief to do anything about it. Downstairs, I hurriedly made breakfast in the huge fancy kitchen. It was empty and cold. The nanny would be here soon to prepare breakfast for my little brother and to drive him to school after that. After all, one couldn't expect my flashing new young stepmom to take care of him. She had way better things to do, like doing her nails, shopping, and most importantly, screwing around. I didn't get how their relationship worked. My dad was a workaholic and almost never around, but I was sure he knew his new wife was anything but faithful to him. I mean, how could he not miss it? Sometimes the guy was barely out the door when he came home. My father had a very well paid for job, but actually, I didn't know exactly what he did. It involved traveling a lot for him, and it had resulted in moving altogether 4 times already in the 3 years since I started living with him. That was very hard on my little brother. He was really shy for an 8-year-old boy. It seemed like every time he'd finally managed to make friends, we had to move. On top of that, no one but the long procession of nannies and me seemed to take any interest in him at all. I hurried down to the garage where I knew a driver would be waiting with the shiny black BMW, ready to drive me and my stepsister to school. Yes, I had a stepsister, the daughter of my stepmother from her former marriage. The two of them were so alike, both in character and looks. Although Jennifer's long blonde hair was real, unlike her mother who dyed it, the reason I hadn't run into her yet was because she always took her own sweet time getting ready, especially on the first day of school. Jennifer loved first days of school. She didn't mind moving either. She claimed that after a year she was sick and tired of all the boys anyway and looked forward to some new treats. I shivered at that thought, even though I knew that was her true thought. She always managed to make herself the most popular girl in school in a matter of hours, and then proceeded to work her way around all the hot guys in the next year. At our last school, it didn't even take her an entire year. And that was not for lack of hot guys. I knew because Jennifer loved to gloat about all her conquests to me. So after our first day, I was always forced to ride with Jennifer, something she hated almost as much as I did. If I had gotten on her bad side, which was often, it meant I had to walk or catch the bus. It was getting late, and I fidgeted in the leather seat. I sat in the back because I knew Jennifer would give a fit if she didn't get shotgun. That had happened last year, and we'd nearly been late because of it. "Don't worry, miss, we'll be right on time," said the driver suddenly. He was new, that's why he didn't know my name. I blushed when I realized I hadn't even looked at him or said hello when I got into the car. Looking up, I met a pair of arresting blue eyes and a slightly tanned face. Messy blonde hair framed his features in soft curls, and I realized with a start that he was at the most 25 years old and stunningly handsome. Oh, I know, Jennifer doesn't want to be late on her first day. I just hate waiting. Don't get why it takes her so long to get ready. She's mostly plastic anyway. The words rushed from my mouth, and shocked, I slapped my hand over it. Treacherous voice. The driver laughed in a very masculine tone. Don't you know? Barbies need to get their daily dose of admiring themselves in the mirror. I smiled back at him hesitantly. He was nice. Too bad it wouldn't last very long. Either my stepmother or sister would sleep with him, or maybe both eventually, and he'd turn to hating me just as much as they did, or get fired by my dad. "I'm Brittany," I introduced myself to him, sticking my hand out to him in a formal handshake, although it was a bit weird since he was twisted around in the driver's seat to face me. He took my hand and surprised me with a soft kiss on the top instead of shaking it. "My name is Dennis," he said with a smirk. He hurriedly let go off my hand and twisted to the front when Jennifer opened the door to the passenger seat and flung herself in it. She still managed to make that look graceful and sexy, of course. "Chauffeur drive," was all she said though, and by her harsh tone of voice, I knew she hadn't actually looked at the driver yet. Dennis raised his hand to his head in mock salute, even though it looked rather real with the gray cap on his soft blonde curls and the gray uniform. "Yes, ma'am," he said as he pulled out of the garage with ease. I leaned back in my own seat and started counting. I wondered how far I would get until she'd start flirting with Dennis. It couldn't be that long. Sure enough, just as I reached 13, I heard Jennifer purr, "So what's your name, handsome?" I suppressed a groan, but still I saw Dennis's eyes dart to mine in the rearview mirror. He didn't look pleased at all. It's Dennis William, ma'am," he said politely. Another look in the rearview mirror told me he was anxious and didn't like the way she was running her hands over his arm at all. The look was almost pleading, as if he hoped I would get him out of that mess. Well, that was new. As soon as Jennifer pulled out her seduction skills, everyone always fell for her, sooner or later, and usually sooner. I shrugged at him, indicating that I was used to this, but I still said, "Hey Jennifer, you looking forward to school? Think there will be lots of hot guys?" I was sure that was the only topic that would get her mind off seducing poor Dennis. It worked because she chirped happily, "Oh yeah." "Can't wait to see." I tuned out the rest of what she was saying, having already heard it a few times in the past few days. I smirked at Dennis, mouthing, "You owe me." He nodded though, obviously relieved. When we reached the school, I looked the building over carefully. It was red brick and sprawled out wide, trees scattered around it. In golden letters above the entrance it said, "West Town High." Behind the school building I could see a large forest spreading out. The parking lot was filled with people milling about, admiring cars, chatting about their holidays after the summer break, in general, catching up with friends. Dennis drove the expensive BMW all the way up to the entrance and with a look at Jennifer hurriedly got out to run around the car and open her door. Everyone was staring at the car, obviously wondering who would have a chauffeur bringing them to school. Exactly like Jennifer wanted it. When Dennis opened her door, she glided out gracefully, like a superstar getting out and onto the red carpet. I shook my head wonderingly. It was no wonder she was popular on the first day of school, especially not clad as she was in a dark red summer dress that ended mid-thigh, exposing the long, smooth length of her legs. She waved her long, blonde locks over her shoulders as she reveled in the attention she was getting. In a rush, everyone that mattered was surrounding her. The guys offering to carry her bags and show her around, asking for her name and her number. Girls giving her fake hugs of welcome and air kisses as they offered her their own names and all the latest gossip. The crowd was already moving away with Jennifer from the car. She always did that to make sure no one would notice my arrival. She didn't do well sharing attention. I was startled when Dennis popped his head in through my door. "You getting out, hun?" he asked with a warm smile. His blue eyes sparkled in amusement. I nodded. "Yeah, just giving the queens some time to get all their attention. Don't need them to notice me." He cocked his head to the side in question as he helped me get out of the car. "Why?" He looked really adorable when he did that. "Don't really like attention," I muttered at him as I straightened. Nobody was looking at us now. Everyone was focused on Jennifer. Except maybe that geeky girl on that bench and those gothic-looking girls a little further down next to a car. "Thanks for diverting her attention earlier, by the way," Dennis said as he made his way around back to the driver's side. I shrugged. "No problem." "How about I take you out on a date to make up for it?" he said with a grin. I drew in a sharp breath in surprise and then glared at him. "You're joking, right?" He couldn't seriously be asking me out if he could get Jennifer, and she was obviously interested in him. "Not really," he said with a smile. "You okay with a Friday? I'll pick you up." He winked at the last part, obviously finding that funny since he was the chauffeur. I swallowed. Wow, he really wasn't joking. "No, I'm sorry, but I don't think I'll be free this Friday." In fact, I don't have an appointment this Friday, it's just that I don't think he's my type. I rejected him then as I waved goodbye. I had to hurry to get my schedule now. "See you after school then, Brittany," he called after me as I hurried inside. The doors closed behind me with an ominous thud, and I knew today was going to be very long. It wouldn't be long before people realized I was new too, and a sister of Jennifer. Then they'd all try to get to know me and ask all about her. For some reason, they always thought that being nice to me would get them closer to her somehow. That only lasted a day or two at the most. Usually after that, they'd realize how much Jennifer hated me and try to get into her good books by being mean to me too. I wasn't sure which behavior I hated most, to be honest. When Jennifer found out I had a date with the hot driver and she hadn't, she'd be really pissed. That usually resulted into her making up something I'd done so that my dad would ground me for her. I couldn't understand why nobody ever listened to my side of the story. Ever. After having collected my schedule and locker combination, I hurried off in that direction. Jennifer had been there as well, followed by a group of people as they all threw themselves at her in an effort to help and impress her. I dumped my bag in my locker and took the schedule and my books for my first period class with me as I searched for the right classroom. The building was large and sprawled out, and I just knew I'd get lost here the first few weeks. The first class was math, and I was glad to realize Jennifer wasn't in it. The teacher was an old, grizzled man, but he seemed nice enough. He waved me to my seat in the back after reading the note, telling him I was new. I was really happy I didn't have to introduce myself to the class that stared at me with obvious interest. The people that hadn't seen Jennifer yet obviously wondering who I was, and the ones that had seen her wondering what my connection to her was. As I sat down, the teacher, Mr. Cook, said, "Sarah, would you please help out Brittany as much as possible? If she's behind on anything, let me know." Then he launched into an explanation about this year's topics he'd discuss with us and the rest of the curriculum. The girl next to me gave me a friendly smile. She wore jeans and a light blue top that matched with her beautiful baby blue eyes. Her brown hair cascaded around her in beautiful wavy locks, and I couldn't help but wonder if she was one of the popular crowd or not. "I'm Sarah, and don't worry, Reynolds is a cool teacher even though he looks scary. I'll show you around if you want," she whispered as she stuck out her hand to me. I shook it carefully. "I'm Brittany, obviously." "Thanks. That would be nice. I'm sure I'm gonna get really lost here. It's all so big." She nodded, but we didn't have the chance to talk any further for the rest of that class. I was glad to see that I wasn't behind at all. In fact, I was ahead off the curriculum by a little. That was good because that meant I didn't have to work harder or struggle with this subject, even though I hated math. I knew I wasn't bad at it. I ignored all the stares I was getting and meekly handed Sarah my schedule after class was over. She was sad to see she didn't have the next period with me, but offered to walk me to the next class anyway. I happily accepted and found it easy to talk to her as she fended off curious people with just a stare. That definitely meant she was popular, didn't it? But I wasn't so sure as we passed a group clustered around Jennifer. She didn't spare them so much as a glance, and most girls there actually glared at her as we passed. At the door to physics, she wished me fun and said with a mischievous smile, "I'll see you at English next period if you can find it." Then she darted away through the filled corridors to her own class. With physics, I did have to introduce myself, but it was made easier because Jennifer was in this class too. I got away with hurriedly saying, "I'm Brittany Baker and I just moved here. I love music and reading." After that, I scurried to a chair in the back and sat down beside a bored-looking skinny guy with a messy mohawk. He didn't even look up when Jennifer started introducing herself, taking her own sweet time. There were some oohs when they heard she had the same last name as me, but that seemed quickly forgotten as they all stared at her. Completely entranced, it seemed, even the teacher. "She really your sister?" asked the mohawk guy halfway through class all of a sudden. I shrugged. "Stepsister, actually." "Ah, that explains. You look nothing alike," he said, and then he resumed staring at the chalkboard again as if it was the most important thing in the world. We didn't exchange any more words, but it didn't take that as a bad thing. After all, he was the only one of the guys in there that didn't stare at Jennifer. That made him score really high in my book. After physics was over, I really didn't have a clue where to go. I had been slow to leave the room, one of the last ones besides the mohawk guy, but he seemed to be absorbed in himself anyway. Jennifer had disappeared with a crowd down one corridor, but I didn't know if she had English with me or some other class. I started off in a different direction, hoping to find someone I could ask for help. 10 minutes later, I stood in front of the classroom door to my English class. I was late. The class had already started. Stupid Sarah with her prediction, I thought with a slight smile. Then I knocked on the door, hoping that the teacher would forgive me, since this was my first day after all. "Come in," I heard a male voice call. It was low and pleasant, and it sounded like he had a British accent. I opened the door a little hesitantly and stepped into the room. My eyes immediately found Jennifer standing in front of the class. Apparently, she'd been introducing herself. I groaned internally. Great, that meant she'd be pissed off with me for interrupting. "Jennifer, why don't you sit down?" the teacher said, and only then did I notice him. He couldn't be older, then 25, just like Dennis really. He was tall though, reaching over 6 foot easily. I could tell that even though he was slumped on the edge of his desk, his long legs trailing in front of him clad in ripped jeans. A white button-down dress shirt was stretched across a wide, muscular chest and did nothing to hide how well-built he was. But more importantly, he had beautiful, stormy gray eyes that stared at me as if he could see right through me. Luscious lips slightly parted to show a set of white teeth with dark brown hair hanging messily across his forehead. His nose was flared a little, as if he was breathing in deeply, smelling something he rather liked. I swallowed nervously, suddenly finding it impossible to look away from those stormy eyes. They sparked something in the back of my mind. A feeling? It was spiraling down into my body, making it tingle in the most delicious way possible. The teacher suddenly cleared his throat, and then he said, "You are late. Care to explain why? And while you're at it, introduce yourself too." His voice was beautiful in that British accent, a little husky, and I wondered why that was. I shivered and blushed, finally looking away from him to survey the class. Then I said, "I got lost. I'm new here. My name's Brittany Baker." I swear I saw him shiver as I spoke, but then he nodded and said a little brusquely, "Have a seat, Brittany. Don't let it happen again." I hurriedly took a seat in the back of the class, right next to Sarah, who appeared to have saved me a seat. She looked at me knowingly, winking once before focusing on the teacher. All I could think was, "Oh my God, he's smoking hot. Oh my God." I have a crush on my teacher, and I don't even know what he's like. I didn't dare look up at him again during his entire class, but I could tell everyone liked him. Jennifer was doing her very best to seduce him, sitting all the way in the front. Then again, pretty much every girl tried to get his attention one way or another. Except Sarah. She just kept smirking at me and him as if she knew something I didn't. I had to hold back a groan as the girl standing right next to me introduced herself to the class. My class. She did it with such an air that told me she'd done it plenty of times before and reveled in the attention. Little attention seeker she was. The too small red dress she wore said it all. It screamed it at me from a mile away. She was definitely the type of girl I try to avoid as much as possible during daytime. At night, maybe if I was very desperate for a meal, but even then I didn't like her scent very much. Too many chemicals from the perfumes sprayed on her skin and the soaps and creams she'd used. Currently, she was smiling flirtatiously at me every other word while still managing to wrap every single male in the classroom around her little finger. Except me, of course. She was skilled, I had to give her that, but that didn't mean I liked her, and definitely not that I was impressed. She probably had a tiny bit of siren blood in her somewhere. The heritage unknown to her, but she deftly took advantage of it. A knock on the door made me smile, finally an excuse to get that Jennifer away from me. "Come in," I called, groaning internally when I heard the girl population in my class sigh collectively at my words. Damned accent. I should have just gone for the American accent, even though I hated it with a passion. The door opened and someone stepped into the room. I couldn't see who, seated on the edge of my desk behind Jennifer as I was, but a delicious scent assaulted my nostrils. Jennifer stiffened, and I was sure she was glaring at whoever it was, her shoulders tensed, like an angry cat. "Why don't you sit down, Jennifer?" I said smoothly, gesturing towards a seat as I spoke. Jennifer whirled around to me, her blue eyes sparkling, a pout on her full lips. I suspected she thought it looked seductive, but it didn't do anything for me. Disappointment flew across her features, but she masked it quickly, sauntering to a chair in the front, swaying with her hips in such a way that I briefly wondered how she managed to walk at all. It just didn't look natural to me. Still, the boys in the room seemed to like it, all eyes glued to her. I turned to face the newcomer and then wished that I didn't. I must have looked like a fool, my mouth falling open just so I could taste her scent better. It was her that I'd smelled before, so delicious that it was almost mouth-watering. Except that the thought alone of biting her for food felt repulsive. A different kind of delicious. She was small, but her legs were long and clad in very snug black jeans, small feet encased in black, worn-looking all-stars. She wore a black sleeveless shirt and a silver necklace, but I couldn't see what exactly. She had her arms crossed in front of her, clutching books to her chest as if she thought she could hide behind them. Her skin was golden, like the sun itself was captured behind it. She seemed to almost glow with it, and I felt such a strong urge to reach out and touch her, to run my hand across that perfect skin, to make her moan my name. I had to clutch the desk tightly to keep myself from actually doing so. She had long auburn hair, cascading around her in wide natural curls, more evidence that the sun lived inside her. Her eyes were a golden brown color, and I realized that both summer and autumn were seasons that described how beautiful she looked. She had literally taken my breath away. I had to force myself to restart the unnecessary motion of breathing. I couldn't go around scaring the kids here. Her eyes were just so amazing that I felt like I would never be able to look away. The longer I looked, the more they seemed like endless pools of molten gold, shining with such allure, pulling me in and telling me they would never let me go. The tingling spreading through my body along with the lust uncurling in the pit of my stomach like an angry beast woke me up. "You are late. Care to explain why? And while you're at it, introduce yourself too." I wanted to snap at her for making me lose my cool, but my voice came out husky and strained. I knew what it meant, and it scared me. "I got lost. I'm new here. My name's Brittany Baker." Her voice was like nothing I'd heard before, so melodic and sweet that it sent a shiver down my spine. I hope nobody saw that. She was uncomfortable with all the attention she was getting, I could tell, the way she glanced around at the classroom. The urge to alleviate her suffering was instant, but I still managed to sound sterner than before. Have a seat, Brittany. Don't let it happen again. I nodded as I spoke the words, pleased with myself for sounding so collected now. Only then did her words sunk in. Brittany Baker. Oh no, she had the same last name as that Jennifer? They were siblings? Impossible. Brittany, such an old-fashioned name. It suited her in a way. It made her stand out from the rest of the girls these days. I knew I'd never call her Brittany if I didn't have to, though. My tongue already yearning to call her Brit or Brittany. She had walked to a seat in the back, right beside Sarah, and I recognized the mischievous look in my sister's eyes only too well. At her wink, one that told me she knew exactly what I'd been thinking when I first laid eyes on Brittany, I scrambled to a standing position and started class. I couldn't concentrate very well, not with that goddess sitting in the back, spreading that delicious scent. I couldn't understand how none of the other boys seemed affected by it. They still only had eyes for that Jennifer. Mr. Clinton, can you explain me that assignment again? Asked Jennifer halfway through my class. She was leaning forward on her desk so her breast pushed up, revealing more cleavage than I was sure I was legally allowed to see on a student. I swallowed my annoyance and carefully explained it to the entire class again, not even once stepping closer to the blonde as she flirtatiously batted her eyelashes, enticing me to come closer. I only had eyes for Brittany, though. She didn't look at me. Her face constantly flushed as she blushed furiously. It made her even more beautiful. Every now and then it seemed like she gathered enough courage to peek up through her long lashes and look at me. Every single time my eyes met those golden orbs of hers and I couldn't look away. I had never been so happy as I was today when I finally dismissed my class for the lunch break. Although it also made me sad because it meant that Angel would be leaving me too. She was one of the last to leave, and before I realized what I'd done, I grabbed her wrist. It made her freeze in her tracks. The shock of actually touching her skin was so intense it nearly had me staggering. It was a good thing the desk was at my back or I really would've. Lust slammed into me as if the floodgates had been opened. I was almost instantly hard and craving for her body, my eyes surely darkening to black. I knew I had to look away from her golden orbs, but it seemed an impossible task. My mouth felt parched. I wondered what her kiss would taste like. She was trembling, her eyes wide, her mouth slightly open to show me the tempting moistness inside. Oh damn, all 7 hells. Someone stop me before I really do kiss her right here on the spot. Mr. Clinton? Sarah's voice interrupted us just at that moment. Bless my sister. I let go off Brittany's wrist instantly, stepping back a little. Don't be late again. Next time we'll land you a detention. Oh, why did I say that? I sounded so harsh and gruff she was going to hate me for sure. Her eyes had widened further at my words, and I could tell she was shocked. I hurried to ease her mind. Don't worry, I'm sure you won't get lost a second time. I added a wink for good measure, to show her I wasn't all that serious. She nodded slowly, her mouth closing with a snap, as if she only now realized it had been open. It won't happen again, I promise, Mr. Clinton, she said with her melodic voice. Then she hurriedly sped from the room. You are in deep shit, brother, was all Sarah said to me as she followed the angel. She cast me one look over her shoulder that told me we were going to have a very long talk on the way home. I wasn't sure I was gonna like it. I wasn't sure I cared though, because all my mind was screaming was, you found your mate. Your soulmate. Follow her. Get her. Make her yours. Mark her. It took a lot of effort to remain seated on my desk, like I usually did. It took a hell of a lot of effort. My body yearned to go after Brittany just as much as my mind. I really needed to calm down first, though. I sat down heavily in my chair. I found my soulmate, and she's a student, and I'm her teacher. She's a human, and I'm a vampire. All I knew was, she's going to be mine. It didn't appear like Sarah had much friends, but she didn't care much about that. To my surprise, the only one who joined us at our table was the guy with the mohawk, the one that didn't speak all that much and wasn't interested in Jennifer. He cast me a curious glance and then looked at Sarah, but he didn't utter a word. Sarah introduced him as, "This is Bob. Don't bother trying to get him to talk. He hates talking." She rolled her eyes at the boy's stupidity or something of the like, then compared my schedule to hers, smiling when it turned out we had 2 more classes together. Even more shockingly, Bob peered over my schedule and then said he had the only other class left with me. He cast me a friendly look before saying, "At least you won't be alone in any of your classes now." Sarah winked at me. Wow, you're being nice, Bob. Since when did that happen? But the sarcastic comment didn't faze the boy. In fact, he just shrugged and went back to disinterestingly fussing with his food. Wasn't he hungry? I talked with Sarah for the rest of the lunch break until I heard the conversation at the table over getting louder. It was the table Jennifer was sitting at, and she was definitely the center of attention. A large crowd surrounding her. Nothing is impossible. I heard Jennifer scoff. She still did it beautifully, of course. Nothing she did on purpose would ever make her look anything but that. She made sure of it. He will be mine. By the end of the month, he won't be able to resist, my stepsister continued, twirling a strand of blonde hair around her finger. I wasn't sure who she was talking about, but I had the feeling it was Mr. Clinton, our English teacher. As if to confirm that thought, Jennifer said in response to someone, "No one is able to resist me, girl, not even Mr. Stay." Clinton. Sarah made a choking sound, and one look at her face told me she was trying to hold back a laugh. Shaking her head, the pretty brunette exchanged a look with Bob, intertwining the fingers of her hands in a curious way while nodding in my direction. Bob stiffened and then looked at me, as if seeing me for the first time. Then he nodded slowly, as if he could see what she meant. "Guys?" I asked them wonderingly. "Yo!" "Nothing, hun," Sarah said with a smile. "I just find it so funny that your stepsister thinks she can get our brother to fall for her." Brother? Is she talking about Mr. Clinton? I nearly spit out my drink as I stared them. I hadn't even realized Bob and Sarah were siblings. "Mr. Clinton is your brother?" I asked, shocked. Bob nodded, a smile on his lips as Sarah said a little crankily, "Yeah, it really sucks, you know. Your own brother teaching at your school. I never get a date. All the boys are scared of him." That just had to make me laugh, and Bob joined in. "Can't be that bad, Sarah. At least you don't have a stepsister who steals all the boys away." "True," she smiled at me, but her eyes were twinkling as if she knew something I didn't again. Then she said, "I think we're going to be best friends." The rest of the day passed by in a blur. It was great having either Sarah or Bob around. It meant I didn't get lost again and that the teachers didn't bother me either. Except one class. The rest of my classes were all without Jennifer. I found my thoughts wandering though, and as I doodled through most of my classes, I realized that I'd been drawing the same thing over and over again. A pair of stormy gray eyes. I couldn't be falling for my English teacher. That was wrong. It couldn't be. It was even worse that he was apparently the brother of the two people I'd become friends with today. But the tingling sensations I'd felt when I first laid eyes on him, or the shock of electricity going through me when he grabbed my wrist, that was something I'd never experienced before. Or the fact that it was so hard to look away from his eyes once they'd captured mine. He'd been staring at me. I knew he had been. Sarah had definitely noticed something between us. She'd been smirking at her brother and me the whole time. When school was finally over, I waved at Sarah and Bob as they sauntered over to a flashy red car that looked very fast and expensive. They stood waiting next to it, so I knew it belonged to Mr. Clinton. I wasn't surprised. He seemed like the type to like fast cars. Dennis was already there too, waiting with the car, so I made my way over to him, trying my best to ignore the stares and glaring at those who did try to approach me. It seemed like with Sarah and Bob gone, their protection was too. When I reached Dennis, he smiled at me and opened his arms for a hug. It wasn't very professional on his part, but I guess he saw how harried I felt, offering some comfort. As I hugged him, I felt immediately a little more relaxed, and I smiled at him gratefully. The sudden feeling that someone was glaring at me made me whirl around, though, only to meet those stormy gray eyes from all the way across the parking lot. Mr. Clinton was standing right next to his car, his fists clenched. I didn't see Sarah or Bob, so they must have already been in the car. Was my English teacher seriously glaring at me because I'd hugged the driver? Dennis suddenly draped his arm around my waist, the gesture a little defiant as if he was doing it on purpose to vex Mr. Clinton. "Well, that's one teacher who doesn't seem to like you," I heard Dennis say as Mr. Clinton finally turned around and got into his car. He sped off a little recklessly, especially for a teacher. "I was late for his class because I got lost," I offered as an explanation, shrugging out of Dennis's embrace and hurrying into the car. I was glad to be finally out of sight of everyone. I really hated attention. It took a while before Jennifer showed up, but I didn't mind. It was fun talking to Dennis. He was very easygoing and relaxed. He made me laugh at silly jokes, and I felt really at ease around him. So at ease that I even started to forget about Mr. Clinton and his beautiful stormy gray eyes. When she did show up, she still wasn't alone. There was one boy carrying her backpack. He was cute, but certainly not handsome. I guessed he only got to carry her backpack because she felt sorry for him. 2 more guys flanked her, both buff and handsome. Obviously, they would be part of the football team or something. 3 more girls were with her, and they all looked a little green behind her back. I guess that would be her new besties, as Jennifer called her fake girlfriends. She kissed the 2 football players each on the cheek as she said goodbye, and then turned to hug all 3 girls, giving them air kisses. That was a habit I really didn't get. All those girls hated each other's guts, yet they pretended to love each other. The Jennifer slipped into the front seat at long last and imperiously told Danis to start driving. She barely spared him a glance now, lost in thought. It was unusual behavior for her, but I didn't comment. Instead, both Danis and I remained quiet, sharing the occasional glance through the rearview mirror. Once he started pulling funny faces, though, it was hard not to laugh. I had to slap my hand across my mouth to keep from making noise. I didn't want to wake the beast. At home, Jennifer left the garage in a hurry, her usual gracefulness disappearing completely. But I took my time, sharing a few more jokes with Danis, most of them about Jennifer. Then I said goodbye and followed my stepsister into the house. I could not believe my day had gone so well, making 2 friends at school and possibly a friend at home as well. Danis was extremely nice and funny. Then I remembered the date I had promised to go on with him. Did he want to be more than friends? Immediately I remembered Mr. Clinton and I felt my cheeks tingle as I blushed. That would never work out. It would be much better if I'd set my eyes on Danis instead, although he was a little old for me too. As I stepped into the house, I heard yelling. It was clear it was Jennifer. She always screeched at the tops of her lungs to her mother if she was upset with something. I wondered what that was. I hoped it had nothing to do with me. "Brittany Lee," my little brother squealed as he sped around the corner to hug my leg with a death grip. I couldn't help but smile. "Hey, Giant," I told him as I affectio-Alexly rubbed his head. His golden brown eyes stared up at mine with such intense happiness that I knew he'd had a horrible day. His nanny came around the corner then, an elderly woman with a stern face this time. She looked a little flustered. I guessed it was from having to chase my impulsive, hyperactive little brother. "Oh, there you are, Andy," the woman panted as she spotted us. I saw him scrunch up his face as he tugged on my shirt, telling me to get down to his level. As I bent down, he whispered in my ear, "I don't like her. She's mean." "Of course," he whispered loud enough for the nanny to hear. She scoffed, as if she'd heard it a few times before and didn't believe him. I patted his head. "Don't worry, hey, it'll be fine, I promise. I won't let anyone hurt you." I wish someone would look out for me as well, but I knew that was just wishful thinking. As if they'd heard me think it, my stepmom suddenly yelled, "Brittany, get over here now." I couldn't help but flinch. I knew Jennifer had been screeching about something I'd done. "Sorry, Giant, I gotta go." "Talk to you later, Kay," I told my little brother, ruffling his dark hair again. "Behave, okay? I'll read you a story tonight." Andy nodded his little head, his face scrunched up. "Careful, Stephanie is unhappy," he whispered before following his nanny meekly back into the kitchen. I breathed in deeply and followed the sound of my stepmother's voice into the living room. "There?" Jennifer was staring smugly at me, her arms crossed in front of her. "Stephanie." My stepmom was glaring at me. "What the hell are you thinking, Brittany? You can't go around flirting with a teacher. I didn't think even you would sink that low." My stepmother screamed as soon as I entered. "Oh, so that's what I've done." Jennifer just totally turned that around. "The bitch." "I didn't do anything," I said. It was a lame defense, but I knew it was useless anyway. Jennifer had fed her mother so many lies by now, and she'd back them up, that anything I said would only make things worse. She continued on a rant, accusing me of all kinds of slutty things I'd apparently done during Mr. Clinton's class. Worst was that she finished with, "Because it seems I just can't trust you. I'm making sure you get transferred to a different teacher's class." Shocked, I stared at her. "You can't do that. I didn't do anything wrong. Jennifer was the one doing all that. Don't you lie to me," Stephanie hissed, slapping me hard across the cheek. Her other hand came up to grab onto my arm tightly, squeezing so hard that her nails dug into my arm, piercing the skin. "Go to your room and don't let me see you again," she added as she shoved me towards the staircase. When she let go, she stalked out of the living herself, not checking if I obeyed her or not. Jennifer smirked at me triumphantly from across the room. "He's going to be mine. There's nothing you can do to stop it." It didn't take a genius to guess she was talking about Mr. Clinton. "You know he'll lose his job, right?" "If people find out," I told her, feeling angry at the hot jealousy spreading through me. I wasn't going to see Mr. Clinton again, and she would have all the time to sink her hooks into him. It was ridiculous, because I would never want anything like that from a teacher anyway. It was, after all, not allowed, Jennifer laughed. I know, Brittany, but I don't care. I could only stare at her in shock for a moment before I hurried up the stairs to my room. I couldn't stand to be near that girl any longer. Behind me, I heard her say, loud enough for me to hear, "He's going to be mine." Remember that.